Coming up on Theater Talk.
This show made front page news because the great Jonathan Pryce was playing the engineer. So the Asian American actors protested against Miss Saigon, and Cameron canceled the show for Broadway. Were you guys in favor of his decision, or were you terrified?
Well, we were terrified by the fact that he was refunding $33 million, if I remember well.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation and the Honorable Thomas Mercer Ray.
Welcome to Dreamland!
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. Now, Susan, when I started out as a kid reporter in this business,
I
one of the
remember.
big shows that I covered, it was the biggest show we had ever seen in the history of Broadway, was Miss Saigon, a terrific musical. 26 years later, it's back on Broadway, and I'm still covering Miss Saigon, written by Alain Boublil and Claude-Michel Schönberg. Welcome, guys, to Theater Talk.
Welcome back to
Welcome. Well, you were here for the 10th anniversary of Les
Thank you. It make us younger.
You have not changed in 26 years.
Of course. Thank you.
But has the show changed in 26 years? What is different, Claude-Michel, about this production on Broadway now from the one you did originally?
Except practically one brand new song for the character of Helen. It's only the production, the set, and the orchestration too, but that's not to be mentioned because that's not as obvious as the physical aspect of the show, which is completely different.
In what way is it different from what I remember?
I must add to that there are more differences in the lyrics. Because with Cameron McIntosh, the producer, we had decided long ago that the day we will redo Miss Saigon, there was some improvements or changes we needed to make. So there are changes everywhere. And in fact, you know, I've written the original lyrics with Richard Maltby Jr.
Yes,
of Miss Saigon.
Right.
And this time I've asked a young writer from Chicago called Michael Mahler to help me in fine-tuning these different sections of the lyrics, which we have finessed or maybe added a joke here and there. And in The American Dream, and obviously the new song maybe is a complete new song. Just the fourth of the song for this character, but I hope the last.
Yeah, you finally got to write the song?
I hope so.
Well, the woman, she's the American wife of the soldier who goes off and falls in love with him.
Yeah.
And it was that always seemed to me to be, that's a difficult part
It's
to
very
get right.
difficult because when we opened the show, few people wrote us and wrote Cameron to say, why don't Chris kill Helen so he can go away with him and have the love affair? And as in the original opera work, Madame Butterfly by Puccini, Kate Pinkerton.
Pinkerton. Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Kate
He lives in London.
Kate Pinkerton, she's a troublemaker, and she has only 2 lines to sing. It's a very difficult character to be liked by the audience because without her, there is no problem.
Right.
But her new song maybe does make her more pensive and sympathetic.
Yes,
That's what
I
we
hope
hope.
so. You know, she has two interventions in the show. One is in Act 1, when she is in Atlanta, on the other side of the world, after having married the soldier, Chris, while Kim, the young Vietnamese girl, who he has not abandoned, but he was forced to abandon because of the war. So it's a great moment where these two women sing about the same man on each side of the earth. And in Act 2, then she is married, she is here, they know they have he has a child, and they have a decision to make. So maybe it's a moment where she suddenly realizes that maybe the kind of love that this Vietnamese girl has given to her husband in an extraordinary week when everyone was living on the edge of the volcano, the last days of the Vietnam War.
Fall of Saigon, yeah.
Before the fall, maybe she can never give the same kind of love that he's been experiencing with her.
Am I correct that in the scene where Kim and Chris symbolically get married and the women are gathered around?
Yes.
Have you put real Vietnamese lyrics there where there were not?
We thought they were accurate because Claude-Michel and I, back in 96 or 7, when we were writing Miss Saigon, the very, very first version, which was in French at that time, we went to a Vietnamese restaurant, and there are many of them in Paris, and we spent the whole evening with a waitress there, trying to make her, approve
of the song?
And after each Vietnamese person coming to her, they were explaining her that it means nothing.
No, not after. Recently, and you were part of that process. Recently, suddenly after 25 years when no one complained, suddenly we received 3 complaints at the same time, saying, do you realize that that doesn't really mean anything, what you are saying? It might mean something, but it doesn't. Fortunately, there is a Vietnamese boy in the company, in the new company, a brilliant dancer and an actor. And this guy, so I went to him and I said, what do you think? And he said, look, if you replace one syllable here and one syllable there in these 4 lines, it's just 4 lines in total, which are repeated, he said it's going to be perfect Vietnamese. And I can swear it is.
Beautiful.
Now, Claude-Michel, I remember the first production as being, back in those days, everything on Broadway was big, and it was the helicopter, and it was a big glitzy set. Is this a spare, more naturalistic version of Miss Saigon, the one that's
It's
on
a
Broadway now?
much more realistic version of Saigon, but a show is a show. The nature of the show is still the same. So for a show like that, or for Les Mis or Miss Saigon, you can't do it in a kitchen. It's impossible.
And you have outdone yourselves with the helicopter.
You have an iconic tool like that, why wouldn't you perfect it?
That's
And
right.
don't forget that the helicopter is in our original script.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to tell the story in Act 2 that we didn't tell in Act 1, because we were following the shape, the structure of the opera work by Puccini, where there is a gap of 3 years in Act 1 between the love night and when she's waiting for him in Nagasaki Harbor 3 years after.
Yeah.
So we wanted to respect that, but in Act 2 we wanted to tell the story, this gap of 3 years, so we must have a flashback to
when
go
they-
back.
when they-
But the helicopter was written there. And the first meeting, creative meeting we had with John Napier, the original set designer, he came to us, he said, what I'm going to do, you want an helicopter on stage?
And we said, watch CNN.
No, we could have said, I told John, we could have written a 747 taking off from Tanksonut Airport. And it's just only a helicopter, so that's your problem, not ours.
Listen,
they did
the Opera Nixon in China, they have the Air Force One on the stage. It was
But he's not flying that
this.
Air Force One.
No, it's not. It rolls it. This show was made front page news back in 1990, I guess it would be.
1989.
89.
Oh, in
81.
America, 1991.
In 1991. But it was on the front page of, I remember, the Daily News, New York Post, big New York Times story, because the great Jonathan Pryce was playing the engineer.
Was cast. to
Yes,
play the
was
engineer.
cast. He played it in London.
And he played it in London, and there was that big equity.
And well, I just wanted to
problem.
yes. So the Asian American actors protested against Miss Saigon. Equity withdrew its support, and Cameron canceled the show for Broadway. Were you guys
Postponed the show.
Were you guys in favor of his decision, or were you terrified?
Well, we were terrified by the fact that he was refunding $33 million, if I remember well, and that we would normally have a little slice of that.
But I must say, we knew that one day it will come.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
What we were terrified is that suddenly the show was not the show we have been writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we never write a show to have controversy about the casting of somebody who was supposed to be half Asian, half European. Because in the opera work, the character of Goro is the go-between.
Yeah.
He's Asian but dressed with a Western
With a Western costume, yeah.
costume. So we wanted the same for the engineer, a kind of half Vietnamese, half. So it turns out that he is Asian.
And even more than that, we didn't know what the word blind casting meant.
Oh, right.
We
right.
discovered the
Right.
existence of problem, and since then, we have become the
Well,
biggest employer
Yes, with the word.
That was
of
that. That's the irony of that story of Miss Saigon.
of blind casting artists.
Of
For
Asian
any show.
performers all over the world have
Yes.
been given a ton of work from Miss Saigon.
Including, and the name of the Asian actor now who plays the engineer is so wonderful.
John Briones. He's a Filipino,
Yes.
of Filipino descent, but he's an American actor.
And he grew up in your production, in a sense.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
because he met us in Manila at the original audition in '88. He came from a little village where everybody was giving him money to buy the tickets for the bus. And he arrived in Manila, and as he had no money, the casting director put him on the chair and writing the name of the people coming to audition with the time and everything. And at the end, he asked us, "Can I audition too?" And he has been part of the company since.
Now, his big number is The American Dream.
Yeah. And I can't say it's big from what I saw
It's
last night.
big, but the meaning has changed there. And particularly now with our present problem with immigration, is there a new irony? Do you see a new irony in this number?
Not a word has been changed.
No, I know, but
the
But
world
it
has
happens
The
that
world
the
has
same
changed.
words
Yeah.
mean something different
Yes.
20 years later.
Yes.
The irony was there. Because
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
It's the character.
What's happening today is that this story could have happened in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, everywhere, where you have a situation with American soldiers being there, and plenty of people, they want to leave the country. For the moment, they want to go to England in Europe.
Yeah.
But a lot of them would like to come to the USA too.
But John is very moving when he plays it now, because, you know, it's a twisted version of the American dream, obviously. But in his perverted mind, it is what he really believes that America is going to bring to him.
The engineer, yeah.
So, and the American dream, isn't it at the end what everyone thinks it's for himself? Everyone is dreaming of a different dream, of the American dream, a different version. And that's what he thinks America is or will be for him. And he's going to be part of a group of people who may not be the kind of people you want to spend an evening with, but that's what he wants.
Right.
What's wonderful with John is that he was born in the Philippines in a small village, and his desire to come to America, he knows exactly what it means.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
As big as
feel
the
it.
engineer.
As part of his life.
Also, we were introducing a whole new generation who have forgotten the Vietnam War, who weren't aware of it.
And that may be why there are so many young people in
Very
the theater.
young people
Last
in
night,
the theater.
half of the audience were 25, 30, 35.
Yes.
Half of the audience
They weren't born when
at the
the show
previews.
came around the
They
first
weren't
time.
born, nothing. And also, obviously, the presence of Eva Nobelzada, who was cast when she was 17.
Yeah,
and who
playing
is
Kim.
a blessing. I mean, she's one of the purest voice you can hear in this part. Even after having been blessed with Lea Salonga 25 years
She was
ago,
wonderful, yeah.
suddenly we have a new miracle that has happened to Miss Saigon.
And these kids
And it's her.
these kids who are in the audience, the 22, 23, 24-year-old, do you think they would have known the show really just from the score, from the
And
popularity of the score all these years?
Obviously, some of them, or the parents, they have heard about Miss Saigon, that it was a musical, important musical on Broadway, and maybe they have a recording at home. I'm sure that there is a knowledge of what the subject is.
It's about a young girl and her mother who makes the sacrifice of giving away her own child for her to find the American soldier who has been obliged to leave Vietnam at the end of the war.
And it's not fiction. Huh?
You cannot
No,
go
no,
further.
no, yeah.
There was so many cases worse that were.
And if they stayed there, they lived in shame, right, in Vietnam?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course,
Of
they
course.
were the children were called Bidol, which mean dust of life, and the women who used to sleep with American soldier
Called
were
Mimai.
called Mimai, which is American prostitutes.
So
And
our
they
own-
were lower than lower in the
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So our only regret, really, on that same subject, is that the original idea is when Claude-Michel came of doing the Saigon, when Claude-Michel saw that picture of this mother handing her daughter at the airport, at Saigon airport, and since the show has opened, we were never able to find her. You know,
The
we
woman in
have
that picture that inspired.
Yes.
The little girl.
the
she
little
was,
girl who is in the picture, she was 5.
11 years old.
So she must be 45 today.
And we always hope that one day she will come and say, it's me.
So we
Never.
mention her once again today. She
We
will
hope
come.
that she's somewhere in America, that she had a wonderful life. And the first preview that we played 2 days ago, I asked everybody to play the show for her, just for the first
Where did you see that photograph?
in a French magazine. It was exactly at the time we were transferring Les Misérables from the original run-through in London, the Barbican Centre,
Right.
to the Palace Theatre in the West End. And we were starting to think about a new musical. I was pestering Alain, why don't we do Madame Butterfly in Granada, when the American did invade Granada, or with the French in the Vietnam. And suddenly I saw this picture and I said, but the sacrifice of this woman is the same as the one undergone by Cho-Cho-San in the opera work. So why don't we do it during the Vietnam War? And
And then I completed by saying, now my idea of having a beauty pageant on stage one day can be done.
Right. And you always wanted to put a beauty pageant in a musical? Why were you interested in that?
I don't know.
He's obsessed by two things, beauty pageant and nuns in a musical.
The nuns I still have to do.
No, there are some nuns in Les Miserables.
Yeah, but they are...
Passing.
they
In
are-
passing. Helping Fantine in bed.
Where did you guys meet? And were you both American musical theater fans when you were growing up?
It was in a ball in France. We started to dance together.
It was really in Paris, where we both were songwriters, pop songwriters.
Pop songwriter, not
Yeah,
theater.
not
What
theater.
theater? It doesn't exist.
The musical theater didn't exist, at that time.
Well, you had the opera buffet, right?
We had opera
Offenbach.
bouffe, we had opera, but
It
you
was
know,
old style. It disappeared.
it was the kind of
completely.
style that we were not interested in. And one day I saw a Side Story on stage, luckily, and that has been like an earthquake in my head, and I just couldn't sleep and was thinking, what can I do with this information? But that was long before I met Claude-Michel. And we met through a song which I heard on the French radio, which he had written. And I thought this song was telling the kind of story which
Which are musical theater
which
songs.
is exactly what I was writing in my lyrics, that I'm trying to make a story and not just a 3-minute gimmick or something.
Do we know this song?
What's the song called?
No.
No,
It was
no one.
every day at 4 o'clock, so you can't.
No one
It's
will know.
impossible.
Title.
Was that the title?
So I called the record company for which Claude-Michel was also working for a record company, and I was working for a publisher in France, a music publisher. And I said, who's the guy who wrote that song? And he was working at EMI, and they gave me his name, and we spoke, and we slowly discovered that we both had an attraction for something which wouldn't be the 3-minute song format. But we had no idea, or no vision of what that could be the answer to that question. And I think the first time was when I went to see, I was traveling to New York on a kind of publishing trip, and I went to see Jesus Christ Superstar by accident. And
By accident.
yeah, because I was offered a ticket of someone who could not go.
So this would be in 1971?
That was in
73.
No,
73.
72. And that night I understood the message for My Side Story. That night I said, but this is what we want to do. This is what is going through my head for years, and which I could not put a name on. And I could see that these two guys, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, whom obviously I didn't know at that time, were writing musicals, but like pop songwriters. And that intrigued me. And then I walked the whole night on 42nd Street, which was believe me, not the kind of 40-second beat
Yes.
like
Oh,
today.
yeah.
And the idea of the French Revolution, our first musical, La Révolution Française, came to my mind. I said, why don't we make Robespierre and Marat and King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette? And I realized soon that all these people were my age. They were 25, they're 27.
Yeah.
All of them were under 30. So suddenly I said, but then they should be allowed to sing.
Right.
And I came back to Paris, spoke to a friend I was working with, and I said, we are going to stop what we are doing. We're going to write a musical. What?
Of the French Revolution?
So I had to explain. and one of the friends who was my usual partner was working with me in that company. They said, that's the time to call immediately Claude-Michel.
And what did you think about the idea of a French Revolution musical?
It was a wonderful challenge because
So
I
Claude-Michel
was,
thought,
I was
let's do it.
I was too fed up with the format of the average 3 minute and 15-second song.
Right.
I've been writing hundreds and hundreds of it. And when I was young, I fell into the opera world. I don't know why, for what reason. So my knowledge of opera score, I was writing big stuff for big orchestra. That's why our friend who talked to Alain Raymond told Alain, but Claude-Michel can bring the scope of the big music and everything because he knows how opera works and he is writing pop songs.
Did you like American musical theater when you were growing up? Did you?
But I didn't know.
You
about
didn't?
it.
There was.
I saw West Side Story 6 times the 2 first day of the release of the movie. I thought it was fantastic.
The Bernstein
But
score, yeah.
there is no tradition of musical theater in France. There is no school. We don't perform at the end of each year any panto of Christmas carol, nothing. So in France, when you want to work in the musical theater, you're doing against the system and not with the system. You have to be yourself, because to be an opera composer in the 70s in France is totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
Everybody was telling me that I was mad. When we started to do the French Revolution, they all told us, so you're going to stop to write songs? But you're stupid or what? You're going to lose everything. And a musical is not working in France.
What's the popular tradition of theater?
There is a big theater play tradition in France, and there was a tradition of opera bouffe
Yeah.
and a tradition of what we call operetta.
Yeah.
But the operetta was never renewed by anybody. So it died with his audience.
Right.
And when we started the French Revolution, it was already 20 years that there were nothing like the Inn of the White Horse or plenty of operetta like that, traditional operetta. There was nothing.
Has your success led people, another generation of French songwriters,
sure
to be
it's our
attracted to the
success.
musical theater?
I'm not sure it's our success, but now every songwriter in France is writing a musical.
Because they are
and you have
fed up
12
to-
musicals this year playing, not all successful at all.
No, no.
But
But to
not-
go back on La Révolution Française, I think we should say that this was in the middle of the disco period in
Yeah.
France.
Yes.
And this concept album that we had done of the French Revolution, on the model of
Right.
the White Album of
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ
Yep.
Superstar,
Yeah.
was an overnight hit and sold 500,000 copies
Really?
in a month.
without any publicity.
Nothing. Then we started to receive calls from everyone who was involved in kind of entertainment, because there was no producer of musical theater
Yeah.
as such.
Yeah.
So we received call from anyone who was doing concert, was doing something in that world, including radio station, offering to turn it into a stage show. In 2 months, we decided, just the 2 of us, that we should write
To link 24.
all the recitative, the missing links and all that, because we only had 24 songs on a double album. And we turned it into, more or less, a
The French
musical.
version of Jesus Christ Superstar in some ways.
And it was hugely successful on stage too.
yeah.
And we had a rock and roll group on stage to play the revolutionaries and a big orchestra, 50 musicians. In those days, it was not a financial problem. We had a symphonic orchestra in the pit and a rock and roll group on stage.
And
Wow.
it was called the first French rock opera. And and still is, because you can still find the record on Amazon today.
Really? But it was, it did not, of course, become Les Miserables. Has Cameron McIntosh ever said, hey, guys, we should look at that French Revolution musical and adapt that for
because he
Broadway?
always thought that it could become confusing because there is a 3-day street revolution in Les Miserables.
Yes.
And 90% of the American audience
Think it's the French Revolution.
Exactly.
No way would they
You said it.
It's true. It's because they thought, where's Robespierre?
Exactly.
All right. The show is Miss Saigon, back after 26 years at the Broadway Theater, where it started originally, written by Alain Boublil and Claude-Michel Schönberg. Thank you very much for being our guests. And
Thank
I hope it runs. How long did the first one run? 15?
It's
10 years. Exactly 10
Exactly
years.
10 years.
Closed in 2001.
Close all right. Well, we wish you another 10 years with this one.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Hey, can you see? Land of the free. Soon you will buy it from me.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Loewe Foundation, the CORY and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy STRELSIN Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you